Well, I hope everyone out there is managing to get through this corona craziness and hanging on and doing all right. I'm just sort of hanging around the house today, uh, making a big pot of beef stew, did laundry earlier, just posted a review video of sometime in New York City, the John Lennon album. So if you're bored out of your mind, don't have anything to do, you might go over and watch that. Got a little downtime, so I thought I'd make a second video. I want to talk about Record Store Day, which, of course, in the midst of all this corona craziness, like everything else in the world, has been put on hold. Has been bumped up to June 20th. Some other things, I had tickets to see Elvis Costello next month and the Psychedelic Furs later this month. Those have been postponed according to the websites. I'm hoping that means postponed and that they'll actually come back later in the summer. We'll see, because I've never seen either one of them, and I would very much like to. Also have tickets to see Cheap Trick in August, which I did see them a long time ago, 79 or 80, 1980 I think. So looking forward to seeing them again. So far that has not been canceled or postponed, and I hope that it stays that way. I hope by August we're back to some semblance of normalcy, at least normal enough to where you can go into the grocery store and get the loaf of bread and roll of toilet paper. We'll see how it goes. But Beetlefest also has been bumped up to October, which was supposed to have been this month or next month. I'm not sure, but anyway, I went to the Black Friday or the Christmas Record Store Day back in November. Bought a few things, not very much. Did a little video on that. And I remember thinking at the time, well, Record Store Day, regular Record Store Day will be around before we know it. Vaguely thought of it again toward the end of the year, beginning of the year, and then pretty much just forgot about it. And I was kind of caught by surprise a couple of weeks ago when the email came that said the list is out, and I was like, oh damn, yeah, I guess it is that time of year. And so I brought up the list, printed it off, looked through it. My first look through it, I wasn't overly impressed by anything, but gave it another second and third look, and I did manage to find a few things. I think there's about 13 things, 13, 14 things that I wouldn't mind getting. Of that, only four of them are things that I really hope to get. The rest are sort of, if they're in the record store and I'm in the mood, I might pick them up. If not, I can live without them. It's no big deal. But let's just get through the list. And I had seen right when this list came out one or two other videos of people talking about what they were hoping to get, so that's what I'm doing here. First one is one that I do hope I can get hold of. It's Cheap Trick. It's called Out to Get You Live. It's a 1977 double live album. Of course, Cheap Trick at Budokan was the one that made them household word. And looked at the track listing, looks pretty fun. Looks to be a good live album. I'm not huge on live albums, but Cheap Trick at Budokan is one of my favorite live albums. It's not a very big list. There's a few albums on there by different bands live that I like, but that's one of them that's a really good one. And so I thought this one might be a fun one to get. They've been releasing, at least for the last several years, maybe every record store day, I'm not sure, but for the last several years they've been releasing some pretty good stuff. So looking forward to getting that. Because the thing with Record Store Day is, for me, I like to get something that's new, that hadn't been out, whether that's unreleased songs, a new song that's not going to be released otherwise, so some live stuff, some alternate takes. It always amazes me. A lot of these things on Record Store Day are just reprints and re-releases of things that are already out and easily available. I remember a few years ago, Janis Joplin's Greatest Hits, and I was in line at the record store where I go, and several people were looking forward to getting that, and I'm thinking, good God, any used record store is going to have 20 copies of that album, and you get it for $4 or $5. I don't know why anyone, and this one is just a repress, a copy of that album, nothing added, no new songs or anything as far as I understood. So I can't imagine why anyone would want to pay 20, $30 for that album just because it has Record Store Day stamped on it, when you could just get a good copy of the original for A lot less. The same thing when it just sort of made me laugh a few years ago when they released Strawberry Fields Penny Lane with the picture sleeve, which was just a reproduction. I mean, I think it was the songs were remastered maybe, but the picture sleeve was just a copy, a reprinting of the 1967 original U.S. picture sleeve, and uh, why would anybody spend $15 for that? Just you know, if you want that, I would want. If I wanted that, I used to have the original sleeve. I sold a bunch of stuff years ago, unfortunately. But if I want that, I want to get the real thing from 1967, not some knockoff repress. But people buy that stuff and it makes them happy, so more power to them. But as opposed to say on Black Friday Record Store Day, they had a Paul McCartney 45, a picture disc, which were two unreleased songs from the Egypt Station sessions, which were very good songs and they were new and had been previously unreleased. That's the kind of stuff I like to get. But it's for everybody, so whatever makes you happy is makes me happy too, I guess. So where was I? Cheap Trick I definitely hope to get. The other one is the album The Doors, The Soft Parade Stripped, which I'm guessing, it doesn't really have a whole lot in the description, but I'm guessing it's just that album without the orchestral overdubs, just the band playing. Sounds kind of interesting. I don't know. If it's around, I might pick it up just for laughs. Um, if it's not, I don't care. The other one I was looking at, and I'd never heard of these band before. It's a female band from the '60s called Feminine Complex, kind of a girl group thing, even though it was released in '69, so a little past the girl group era. But I think they formed around '65, '66, and no idea who they are. If it's around, I like girl group stuff and '60s music, so it'd be a blind buy. I might give it a shot if I see it. Um, Next thing I might get Al Green. Green is Blues, which is his debut album. It's on the blue vinyl, I think. Al Green's great. I don't have his debut album, so if I see that, I'll probably pick that one up. And another one that if I don't get it, it's not a big deal. This is one I'm not, probably almost certainly not going to get, but I'm glad that it's coming out. The Kinks Chronicles is a double album. Came out in the early '70s of sort of greatest hits and sort of great album tracks. It's one of the best compilation albums ever. It's up there with the Red and Blue Beetle albums and Hot Rocks by the Rolling Stones. It's essential. I've got it. That's the reason I'm not getting it. They're re-releasing it on red vinyl. If I see it and the price is not ridiculous, I might get it. But I've got a really good copy of it that I've had for years, so I'm probably not going to be picking that up. But if if you need an introduction to the Kinks, that's a great way to do it, and that's an album's a solid 10 from start to finish, a double album of just some greatest hits and great album tracks, and just really essential. Like I said, one of the best greatest hits or compilations ever released, in my opinion. So I probably won't be getting it, but I would urge other people who are not that familiar with the Kinks to pick it up and learn about, in my opinion, the second best group ever. This one I'm almost certainly not going to get also. It's Instant Karma, John Lennon 45, with the reproduction of the British picture sleeve, not the American picture sleeve. And it's supposed to be remixed. Kind of curious as to see how the song sounds, the new version, or the new remix, not version really, but new remix. I can look that up on YouTube though. If, like I said, if I see it and it's not $15, which is, I'm not going to pay $10 or $15 for it, which I'm sure is what it's gonna cost. But so probably not going to get that, but maybe. And this is sort of like that Janis Joplin and Strawberry Fields Penny Lane thing, where it's just a common release of a common record, and people go out and spend tons of money for some reason because it has a record store day stamp on it. I don't get it, but I think I'll probably just leave Instant Karma for all the other people that want to get that. The other thing, Beatle related, and I think that's the only two Beatle related things this time around, is the McCartney album, his debut album from 1970, which I already have. I have a couple of copies of that. Great album. The only reason I might get it is it's that, what you call it, audio file. I believe it's like one of those audio file releases, so the sound quality on those is really good. And I'm not positive, but I think, I'm probably wrong, but I think it might be one of those 45 RPM albums like Analog Productions puts out, and those are supposed to be incredible sound quality. Uh, so maybe on that, even though I already have the album. But again, probably not. Here's another one I hope to get out of the four I hope to get. The second one is called For a Few Dollars More, the soundtrack, the Ennio Morricone, I guess that's how you say his name, that does the soundtracks for all those great spaghetti westerns back in the day, and a ton of other movies too. So For a Few Dollars More is one of the Clint Eastwood, one of the trilogies of Hang 'em, was it Hang 'em High and Good, Bad, and the Ugly. It's a 10-inch record, and I like that spaghetti western music, so that stuff's cool. Problem with this is they're only making 400 copies, so my chances of running across that in my record store are probably slim to none. But if I see it, I'll grab it up. Live at the Paradise in Boston in 1980 by the Pretenders, another live album. If I see it, maybe. I'm thinking that would be a live album that might be one of those things that you listen to once or twice and never listen to again. Love the Pretenders, but again, I'm not a huge fan of live albums. So we'll see. The other one that I really hope to get, the third one, Let It Bleed by the Rolling Stones, which, not like I need another copy of that. I've got 3 or 4 copies of it as it is. The only reason I would like to get it is that it's a special uh, splatter or multicolored vinyl edition, and every one is going to be done individually, so everyone is going to be unique and different. So it says in the record store day listing anyway, and come with a certificate of authenticity, whatever that's worth. But this is another one they're only making 900 copies, so that's going to be a hard one to find. But if I do run across it, I would like to get it. Probably never play it, but just to have it as a collector's edition, open it up and see what the vinyl looks like, and otherwise set it on the shelf and just put it somewhere where I can look at it every once in a while. 900 copies, that's going to be a tough get, so probably not going to run across it, but I would very much like to get that. Another record is called Psych France, 1960 to 1970, which is just psychedelic music from France. Not sure how much psychedelic music people were making in 1960, but anyway, I like the French girl group, the Yee Yee French girl songs from the 60s a lot, and so this I'm thinking is probably male bands, probably some females too in there, but just psych rock and pop music from France. I like stuff like that. There's a couple of that in the list here. There's some other various artist things that always come out. Those Rough Trade Guide to it, different things. They've got a psychedelic Brazil album, might be kind of interesting, and a couple others I saw but didn't list. But Psych France, if I run across that, I'll probably pick that one up. They're re-releasing Odds and Sods by The Who, which is an album that came out in the 1973 or 4. Got it a long time ago. It just collects some unreleased tracks and some singles that weren't on albums. So wouldn't get this again because I already have it. The only thing is they're going to make this a double album where it was a single album when it originally came out. So they add even more of some B-sides of singles and unreleased things, which I've heard all of those, but it'd be kind of fun to have them on one album. They have Dogs Part 2 on it, but unfortunately they don't have Dogs, which is one of the great Forgotten Who singles from 1968. But yeah, if I run across that, I might pick it up. Then the fourth and final one that I really want to get is by Wire, and it is called 1020, and apparently it's only coming out for records. It's a record store day exclusive, so not coming out later, or so they say. But it's also very limited quantities, so this is the one. Probably this is the one I want most out of the entire list. This and maybe the Cheap Trick after it. But I'm thinking it's going to be a hard one to find too, because there's only, I forgot to write down the quantity, but I think there's only like 1,000 copies or so being made. 1020, and Wire's a band that they've been around since 1977. Were a great punk band or post-punk band, whatever you call them. Their first three albums from 77, 78, and 79 are essential, just great albums that should have been huger hits. And then they kind of broke up for a while, came back in the late 80s, and through the late 80s and 90s released some albums which are pretty good, solid, not exactly great in some cases, but pretty solid. And they've been releasing pretty good albums from the 2000s on. And in January of this year, they released this, Mind Hive, which I got, which is just a really good album. Uh, I'd say best album of the year so far, but it's not like I buy new music very often, because most new music is, well, most of it blows, so it's not like I listen to it or buy it too often. But this is a good one. Psychedelic Furs have a new album coming out here in a month or so, and I've heard a couple of songs off of that, and I've ordered the album. The two songs I heard are really good. And Paul Weller has a new album coming out in June or so, and I've heard one song off of that. It's on his website, and that's really good. So looks like there's going to be a few good albums this year, and this is one that's really solid. But the reason that the Wire album for Record Store Day is called 1020, the number 10 and the number 20, is because the album that they released in 2010, and I just forgot the title, Red Bark Tree or Bark Tree Red, and then this album, Mind Hive, for the 2010 album, they recorded more songs they used for the album. And for Mind Hive, same thing. So these are just sort of leftover songs that they recorded and didn't have enough space to put on the album. So it's unreleased stuff. So sounds fun. I'm really hoping to get a copy of that. And the last one I might get, Roger the Engineer by the Yardbirds, which is classic Yardbirds. It's closest they came to making an actual album. That maybe Little Games, because their earlier albums were pretty much just hits and filler. But Roger the Engineer is a great album. I already have it. They're releasing this in an alternate cover and as a double album instead of a single album, with some extra 45s and stuff from that period, and extra, I guess, unreleased or alternate takes. So that could be a little bit interesting. This is the Yardbirds with Jeff Beck, and right before Jimmy Page comes in. So just classic stuff, and a great album if you don't have it. So that's what I'm looking at, hoping to get for Record Store Day, at least some of that stuff. And just wondered if you guys have had a chance to look at the list yet, and if so, what you're got your eye on and are hoping to get. So just tell me in the comments, or make your own video, or ignore everything I said and go do something else instead. Anyway, that's it. Everybody keep the faith, and we'll get through this corona thing, and talk to you later.